what kind of agency experiences agencies have with rolling out accessibility programs and accessibility on their website. So Erin, welcome. So
Correct.
Elevation works exclusively with nonprofits. So when you see accessibility coming up for a new client, what's that pattern look like? How's it typically surface?
Well, the pattern is that it doesn't usually come up until we bring it up. So, with a small nonprofit building their first website, it basically never surfaces unless someone involved, let's say a board member or a volunteer, has a personal experience with a disability. But our more typical client is a medium-sized, reasonably well-resourced nonprofit, usually hiring us for their third, fourth, or fifth redesign. And usually, when we win that work, we win it through an RFP. And in those RFPs, accessibility shows up maybe half the time. And the ask is almost always something vague, like the site should be ADA accessible or should follow accessibility best practices. But it's usually clear that nobody within the organization knows what that means. And they're hoping that we do and that we fill the gap, which is fair. I don't expect a nonprofit to know the intricacies of the ADA or WCAG. The other way it comes up is because we intentionally inject it into the onboarding process. So we go looking for this. We inject it into our main point of contact agreement. We'll ask, do you need any accessibility accommodation as the main liaison during the project? And in the kickoff call, sometimes that will surface like, yeah, I'm colorblind. Like, how can you help with that? Or it also comes up during our UX questionnaire. So, of course, when you're doing accessibility correctly, you are injecting that into the design process from the very beginning. And so we'll ask questions like, do you have any known audience groups with known disabilities or like a higher prevalence than an average audience? And the answers to that are really telling. Some people will say, like, we have audience members who don't speak English, which obviously isn't a disability. That's a universal design issue, not an accessibility issue. And so people conflate the two constantly. So yeah, that's generally how it works. Like it doesn't come up until we raise it.
So it sounds like it's a mix of legal and a mission issue. A lot of time in like the private sector, it seems like when we encounter businesses at Accessible Web, it's oftentimes a legal issue, and we try to educate them on the mission, on the kind of positive sides of it. But it sounds like it's kind of a mix when it comes up with nonprofits.
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised, like in terms of the legal versus mission angle, maybe 1 or 2% come to us saying, look, inclusion is core to our mission. We want the site to reflect that. Far more often, it's fear. Like they get a demand letter, they know someone else that got a demand letter. And then they've absorbed all of this fear-based marketing around overlay tools like buy this
Mhm.
widget or get sued. And the painful irony of that is that the quick fix makes it worse. Right. So yeah, if you um generally when people come to us, it's mostly they frame it around compliance. And what I try to do is shift it to mission at some point. I do
Yep.
offer free accessibility consultations to every client. So they are mandated to sit down with me at some point, usually right before they hit the content phase of the project. And I
Okay.
will teach them how to write accessible content. But I'll start at the very beginning because people need a frame for this. And while I'm framing the accessibility challenge to them, I will usually point out that this is an audience expansion issue. Like I will say, look, if you're not including this, you're eliminating 25 to 30% of your audience. And I try to reframe it away from legal, which is how most people first hear about it.
Interesting. I like the free mandated training. That's
Oh yeah.
a great way to that's a great way to do it.
Yeah.
So I imagine a lot of the nonprofits you work with have communities that include people with disabilities. And as you're working to reframe this, what's it look like when, maybe one example or maybe generally, like what's it look like when an executive director or board member or the marketing person you're working with kind of has that aha moment and it clicks?
Yeah, usually it's because I get them to a place where they stop othering the disabled population because I make it real for them. So in this training that I do, I go one by one through the four categories and I'll say, like, here's the kinds of conditions that we encounter. Here's the kinds of remediations we make on the web for that. And I'll give lots and lots of examples, hoping that one of those examples will land.
Mhm.
So for example, like um, everyone thinks of disability as this under the medical model instead of the wider like biopsychosocial model. They'll think of it as just talking about these tiny populations of like people who are, 100% blind or deaf or, like with a severe disability that is permanent and genetic. They don't think of it in terms of the wide range of temporary disabilities and also the environmental and situational disabilities. So I cover all three. And I'll talk about things like, hey, let's imagine that you're commuting to work and you're on a shaky train and you're trying to tap a touch target that's just too small. I try to put them in a scenario where they can see themselves in that scenario.
Mhm.
Maybe you break your wrist and you're in a cast for 6 weeks and you can't use a mouse. Like, how does your work change in that situation? How can we accommodate you? So I reframe this as um, like, in terms of having an aha moment, I will say, look, this is real. This applies to everybody. If you live long enough, you will get a disability. Like what I would term a disability is not what most people would think of as a disability, but all of those temporary and situational conditions. And then I'll talk about statistics and just try to raise awareness of like, hey, look, everyone cites the 1 in 6 number that the WHO cites, like 1 in 6 people have a disability. That still doesn't really make it real for people, but I always couch that and say disability statistics are underestimates. They're the floor and not the ceiling. If you're in a wealthy country where people go to the doctor a lot and there's less stigmatization, like for example in the United States, it's closer to 1 in 4 actually. And then that number moves to 1 in 3 when you're talking about the 45 to 64 age bracket donor sweet spot. And then if you get to 65 and up, it's almost 1 in 2.
Mhm.
And so if you ignore accessibility, you're writing off a quarter to a third of your donor base. And when I
Mhm.
say those words, they realize, oh, I can't afford to ignore this population.
That's really interesting. Interesting segue. So we often find a lot of our customers are coming to us and like the legal side of it is what opens their wallet, right? The compliance
Yeah.
side is what makes them pay money, add budget to a project to do this correctly. So and then you're raising a very interesting point for the nonprofit world where the donor sweet spot is typically older folks, right? I assume that's
Mhm.
what yeah. So um
And females. I
okay.
hate to say this, I don't want to make it sound like men don't engage in philanthropy. They do, but if you look at the average nonprofit executive staff or just volunteer force, it's like three-quarter female.
Okay.
And we know that disability prevalence is always higher in females by at least a few percentage points. And that's true across every state in the United States. Every time I give the presentation, I look at the state specific stats and it has always been, 3 to 4% higher. And so I will tell people, look, if you have a female skewing audience, which they almost always do,
Yep.
there's a higher prevalence there. There's more chronic conditions. Females live longer.
Yeah.
They suffer more healthcare inequity. They're more often the victims of gender violence. So there's lots and lots of reasons why if you have a female skewing audience and an older audience that is
Yeah.
the engine of support for your nonprofit, you should care about this.
Awesome. Awesome. That is such great framing to kind of put the positive spin on why you should do this.
Right.
Are you seeing your clients getting hit with ADA lawsuits or losing grant funding because they're, not compliant with ADA Title II? Of course, the deadline got pushed back, but Are you seeing any clients like running into legal repercussions for not doing this properly?
Well, there's a little bit of a, error of however you call it, like the people who did get hit with those lawsuits, those frivolous lawsuits, usually don't come to me because they don't exist anymore, right? But
Okay.
among the clients that come to us, thankfully, only one um, got hit. Now, this was an organization that was well resourced enough to hire a legal team and get over that. But we had one prominent case where, yes, they came, and I would say it's about 1 out of 100. We have had a few definitely be threatened, um, and they had basic protections in place. Oftentimes, the thing that would get them threatened is that they had an overlay tool on their website. So, as I alluded to before, like that is something that now is putting a target on your back if you have an overlay tool on your website. And so we took care of that. That's what motivated the redesign. They realized we can't slap this on as a band-aid solution anymore. But yeah, the generally like people that get targeted, they already know that they're subject to this compliance umbrella. So large universities,
Mhm.
community development corporations, nonprofits that subcontract for state programs like Head Start. We've done a lot of work for them. Um, the one client that got the demand letter got it because they had a single unlabeled button. And so they did settle it. And all the rest, like they kind of saw it coming. We had another one that got a threat because they had a large library of PDF documents that were not tagged for accessibility. And they were able to fix that by doing um, a very fast push to get those documents turned into actual HTML pages. So but thankfully it doesn't happen that much, but I think there's a survivorship bias at play there.
One of the interesting things we see with nonprofits is a lot of them are obviously receiving grant money or money from the government. And historically, and this is part of the funny thing with ADA Title II and ADA Title III, but this has been a requirement and now it's being enforced. And so we see, it's being enforced too to different degrees, and depending on the organization, there's different awareness of even, on behalf of the folks doing the enforcement on how to enforce this properly. So we see a lot of organizations that have been taking grant money year after year, checking the box for, yes, we are accessible. And
Hmm.
then kind of, no one's really held them to that. And now all of a sudden they're being, held to it. And so it's kind of this interesting dynamic where they know in the back of their mind they need to do more of it, but until someone actually says, "Hey, can we get your VPAT or can we take a look at what you've been doing on the accessibility front?" There's not really a ton of progress that's been made.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's surprising the degree to which people um they just don't know, and it's not out of malice. Like their intent is good.
Right.
They really just don't know. And so that's why I make it a particular point to talk about like if you come to me for an audit, I'm not going to shame you for having unlabeled buttons or if you don't have a skip link or something. I'm just going to make you aware because if you knew, I know you would have done something about it.
Mhm.
Let's not make perfect the enemy of good here, which is Peter and you and I have had conversations about this in the move to WCAG 3.0. As WCAG evolves, it's taking on more and more of that, like understanding, that practical understanding that like intent really matters here, and people just don't know that nonprofit leadership is not comprised of a bunch of ADA compliance experts, and we have to face that reality and work with that.
All right, let's talk about websites. So when you're inheriting a website, maybe it was built by someone else, or maybe it's an organization that's coming to you, via an RFP, thinking about a redesign. When you're looking at websites that you didn't build, where are you commonly seeing the most accessibility errors?
So I'm seeing them in all the familiar places, right? No visible focus highlights, no landmarks in the code, poorly labeled forms, no skip links, like just the really most basic level. But what I think is unique to nonprofits is that we have this situation where nonprofits use a lot of third-party tools. A lot of nonprofits will use a donor CRM tool, for example, or they'll have HR software where they're embedding their job listings, or they'll have a volunteer sign up form that is an iframe. And so nonprofit websites, because of how they evolve, they tend to have multiple volunteers, multiple staff members that are in charge of them. They change hands over the years. And so people will kind of Frankenstein this site together. And there's a lot of embedded content. And anytime you embed content, now you have a modal. You might have a pop-up. You are vulnerable to whatever the accessibility level was of the original code that you embedded, and you can't change it. And so that's what I see as unique to nonprofits is that they just have a lot of embeds, and it's particularly pernicious because those are the places where our key conversions are happening. Like an embedded donor form, right? An embedded volunteer sign up form, an embedded event registration form. A lot of times keyboard users can't tab into them, or you can't tab out of them, or a screen reader can't read them at all, or it goes beyond just like a styling issue. We noticed it for years as just, oh, we can't style that. And then once we got smart about accessibility, it was like, oh, there's a bigger problem there, which is that we can't make that accessible because we can't change that code. So we had to start advising our clients to leave those forms off their website
Yep.
in cases where that code is not accessible at all, and they need their site to be ADA accessible. If they're bought into a donor CRM tool and they're very entrenched in it, and it's not accessible, which almost none of them are. I won't name names, um, but at that point, we unfortunately, because it hurts someone's SEO, right, to route people off the website, but we have to advise them like, well, we can't build you an accessible website with this social media feed in here. We can't give you all the features that you want. And we hate that, but at least we're trying to be a good partner and do our due diligence. And
Yep.
but then there's just a lot of link outs, so that's what
Yeah.
I see a lot. Everything else is kind of easy to fix. We fix it through our redesign process, but the embeds is like a ongoing issue that dogs us.
And you all use WordPress, so it's open source, and
Yeah,
you've got the development skills in-house to be able to make the customizations to pretty
that's
much
right.
change anything as needed.
That's right.
Yep.
That's why we use WordPress. I mean, if you look
Right.
at, I don't want to throw anyone under the bus here, but like, yeah, if you go to these closed source platforms
Mhm.
that, their editors are non-compliant, their themes are
Right.
non-compliant, the code out of the box is non-compliant, then there's nothing you can really do about that other than write a letter into their dev team and say, hey, I've noticed this. And
Yep.
generally, you'll get a message back saying, "Yeah, sorry, we're not accessible. We're not claiming to be. Don't hold us to account for that." And it's not in our product pipeline. That is the number one. Like I do an audit every year of every plugin and every third-party tool that Elevation uses. I ask for
Okay.
VPATs. I ask for ACRs. Anyone who wasn't able to furnish me one gets taken out of our stack of third-party tools we're willing to use. And we look for alternatives because
Yeah.
we have to.
I mean, that's awesome. That was going to be my next question is, what advice do you have for nonprofits that are trying to figure out what third-party CRMs or website platforms and it sounds like you've got an internal list, and
Yep,
you just mentioned VPATs, accessibility conformance reports in the VPAT format is something, it's kind of an industry standard report. Are there any other tips you have for nonprofits looking to, build out their tech stack with accessible third-party partners that they can use?
Yeah, usually if a tool cares about accessibility, they'll have a page devoted to it. They'll have some kind of a statement. Um, or they'll have someone that you can write into and ask this question. I've been pleasantly surprised with some plugin developers that, I mean, if they're being honest, they'll say, I had no idea about this, but yeah, like teach me, I'm willing to learn, or,
Yep.
what are the main barriers you're facing and let me see what I can do about that.
Yep.
But yeah, usually you'll almost never find a published VPAT, okay?
Right.
But you will find either a video on their YouTube channel or, something in their marketing because they realize that it's a market differentiator. If there's nothing at all in their marketing, probably they're not doing anything about it. And if you write in, that's what they'll confirm. Um, I mean, there are like WordPress themes that are built to be accessible out of the box. If you go to Theme Forest, if you go to any of the major theme libraries, like you can filter by the ones that claim to be accessible anyway, or that they prioritize accessibility features. So um, and then for plugins too, they'll always mention it if they have built-in accessibility features. So read the descriptions, and if there's nothing in there, you probably skip and just find. There's so many. The WordPress plugin database is like over 50,000 plugins at this point. They're
Mhm.
not all created equal, obviously, but for whatever functionality you're looking for, that's a great thing about open source. Like if the thing you're looking at doesn't include that, then just move on to the next.
Mhm. Yeah, we've been doing accessibility for 10 years at Accessible Web, and it, it's always been really interesting to see the layers of accountability where for
Mhm.
any nonprofits that are here today, take the time to look at your third parties and to send that letter, send that email, look at their websites and let them know that you expect accessibility to be part of their feature matrix, right? That this is something they're thinking about. And then what happens is they probably won't do it for the first person, right? But they start to get two to three people, and then the accounts team, the sales team, right, finds maybe they've gotten a couple deals right to the finish line, and then they couldn't claim that they were accessible, so they couldn't close the deals. The accounts is reporting that they've lost a couple customers or that a key account is asking for it. And then that's what drives these third-party software companies to either do it internally or to come to accessible web. So when we get customers, a lot of it is, hey, I've got a big contract that I'm trying to win or I'm trying to get renewed that requires accessibility. We haven't done this before. Can you help us out? So anyway, as nonprofits with websites, you're the ones paying into these third parties. Like Aaron said, a lot of them aren't accessible, and this is the same in any industry, unfortunately, still. But 100%, we would recommend, we would love your help in bringing this to their attention so that they realize it is important to you, their customers, so that you can service your customers, your donors, the folks that you're working to fulfill missions on. So anyway, everyone kind of holds everyone accountable, and that communication needs to happen, or else this just gets swept under the rug over and over again.
Yeah, it's usually a market. It's usually a dollars and cents argument.
Yep.
Unfortunately, there's very few people that are like, yeah, I'm going to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
But I issue soft threats all every year in January. I'm like, are you, is your tool accessible? Do you have a VPAT or ACR? If you don't, how does this play into your product pipeline? And then some of them will come back. They have come back and said, if we don't do this, are you going to cancel your subscription? And it's like a very flowery, nice, yes, that is exactly what will happen. If you don't prioritize this
Right.
at some point, then we can't use you anymore.
Yep.
Yep.
Cool. All right. So we're getting close to time. Let's try to put a bow on this here. So if someone on this call walked away and did one thing this week to improve their website's accessibility, what would it be? What would you tell them to do?
If I could only pick one thing, I would say appoint an accessibility advocate. That would be one person who takes requests for accommodation and put their contact info on the same page where you have your accessibility statement. Or even if you don't have an accessibility statement, which I encourage you to get, like at least have a listener, at least have someone that a user can turn to if they experience a barrier. Document those requests as they come in a spreadsheet. This is the most powerful hedge that you have against frivolous lawsuits because it does show a good faith intent, even when your knowledge of accessibility isn't perfect. And your users will teach you at a nice, manageable cadence so you can fix them one by one exactly where your barriers are. Um, Again, I think nonprofits have good intentions. Nobody puts up these barriers on purpose. They just don't know. So don't be ashamed of what you don't know. Just start today, like fix your alt text, fix what you already know how to fix. If you don't know what to fix, you can come to me. I do pro bono consultations to get you started. And then, of course, Accessible Web, does training and audits and, all their wonderful ramp tool for not that much money, right? You can at least get an automated scan for what, Peter? It's like $50 a month you
I mean,
spend.
it's 14-day free trial, so you can
14-day free
do,
trial,
yeah, and
right?
then 49 to 600 after, depending on the level. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's something that probably most even small nonprofits could put in their budget.
Mhm.
But have an advocate, have someone who's at least willing to listen, because listening to people with disabilities and the barriers they report to you, you have to give them a channel at least to report
Yep.
them to you. Um, so start anywhere and start now. That's what I would say.
Yeah,
Perfect.
we have a feature in Ramp that is it's called user ticket. So there's an embeddable form you can put on your accessibility page that automatically routes user tickets into Ramp. And then you can also have the advocate at your organization enter them in manually as they pop up. But 100% having a documented paper trail
Yep.
of
Mhm.
folks with disabilities providing feedback and you showing that you provided accommodations and that you ideally helped them to troubleshoot the issue, worked with them to troubleshoot the issue, and remediated the issue. This is like one of the craziest things about our platform is, in my mind, this is like the most important thing you can do to be defensible, to provide amazing service for folks with disabilities, and it's the least used part of our platform. And
Mm,
the other thing I would say to add on to that is, you don't need to treat accessibility as this dirty word that no one should talk about until you feel like you're perfect because you're never going to be perfect. This is about progress over perfection. This is about creating a environment, a community of inclusion, and we encourage companies, nonprofits. It doesn't happen as much as we'd like, but we encourage our customers to reach out to their customers and say, "Hey, we're working with Accessible Web. Can you come use our website and provide feedback? We have a form on our website now. We want your feedback." And so many times our customers won't do this because they think it's going to lead to an immediate lawsuit,
mm,
that they're just going to get sued right off the bat. But that's not the case. Like folks love to hear your users, your customers with disabilities love to hear that you're working on this. I can guarantee that your users are going to provide feedback, are going to be excited about starting the conversation and the fact that you're listening and working towards providing a better experience. And that's really like Aaron said, the number one thing is putting that feedback mechanism in place, whether it's an email address, a phone number, a form, and then listening to your customers. All right, Aaron, one more thing. Give you a chance to throw in a last minute sales pitch here, kind of.
okay.
Um, but but to you, Elevation, what does ongoing partnership look like in practice? Like what should a nonprofit be looking for, expecting, asking for from their web design agency on the accessibility front?
It's a great question. So you should expect some documentation of your site's accessibility at launch time, like as a baseline. What is not reasonable to expect is that the agency that built your site will keep it accessible forever. That is on you because so much of it has to do with the content that you add post-launch. But a good partner will offer continuous monitoring, such as what Accessible Web offers through RAMP, and then guide you on where to get a real human audit. Um, so in WCAG 2.1 AA, which is the standard that ADA adopted, there's 50 success criteria, and only 17 of those are actually endorsed by WAI themselves as being something you can check with an automated tool. We need humans looking at this, and we need to know what a good audit looks like. And it's not obvious what you should look for in an auditing agency. There's a lot of auditing agencies out there. So an agency should be a good partner, and they should guide you in how to select a third-party auditing agency. They should not sell you an audit of the website that they themselves built, because even though that's not illegal, that's a conflict of interest. And if you're ever audited or in a dispute, you don't want to say that the same people who built the site graded their own homework. It just doesn't pass the smell test. So the mark of a trustworthy agency is one that's willing to send you elsewhere for the audit. For the audit, they'll give up that business and say, let's, for your own good, let's have somebody else do that. And here's what to look for. But you have to know, you have to educate yourself as a baseline on good content accessibility. And that's why I do the consultations I do. I do them pro bono. If you want to sit down and hear my spiel that goes on for somewhere between an hour and 90 minutes, I will teach you everything you ever wanted to know about content accessibility. And I'll do it for free because this is my passion area. So
Awesome.
Uh,
Awesome, Aaron. I think we pretty much did it. We came in right about a half hour, amazingly. Not a 90-minute discussion.
thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Obviously, you're going to go a little over time here. So we are
same.
time for your questions. If you have a hard stop, we do record this section of the webinar. We make this available on YouTube and our website. So thank you, everybody who has stuck with us through this time. I think this was a fantastic conversation and well worth a little bit of extra time there. We ready to jump into questions here, Peter?
Let's do it.
Okay.
yeah.
So this one is, I like this question. I think it's a really great question. I also feel like you guys kind of answered it. It was posted a little while ago. You answered it kind of in that last spiel there. But when budgets are tight, how should nonprofits leaders think about accessibility investments relative to other mission-driven priorities? Aaron, what is your take on this one? I think this is a really relevant question for the space. Obviously, budgets are budgets. We have to decide how they get allocated, and I know that my take would be aligned with what we just talked about with progress over perfection, and that there's always somewhere you can start at a cost effective place for your organization. But I'd love to hear your thoughts too as an expert in this space.
Well, I mean, first, like you need to understand kind of where you fall under this compliance umbrella. Like if it's an I'm continually shocked at the number of people that need to be compliant and don't know that. And it kind of hits them like they're surprised. So first, like educate yourself whether you are subject to these rules. I guess you could defer it if you're not. But yeah, just going back to um, I like to bring it back to universal design. So, like when you're designing for accessibility, you're really designing for everybody, but there's other benefits to adopting accessible design. So, your SEO is going to improve if you adopt accessible design. The thing that AI engines want to cite, the thing that they look for, are the same factors that make a site accessible. So you should know that. If you want AI search visibility, my question would be to throw it back to you. How important is it that you have reach as a nonprofit, that you get seen? How important is it to you that you have a good Google rank? These are things that should be important to you that you should invest in. And it's difficult to make the argument because I know that it's tough out there. There's not a lot of grants for like unstructured grants that can go towards marketing for nonprofits. Most of them are programmatic grants, but there are grants out there. I would say know what you are subject to in terms of the regulations, and then invest in universal design and invest in accessibility. From the standpoint of what we talked about today, you're going to lose a huge portion of your audience if you don't, if you're not taking care of your donor retention, which is the most important thing you can do as a nonprofit, right? It's much harder to attract a new donor than it is to keep a current one. And all of the things we talked about today are the things that are going to help you keep your donors. So how important is that to you? That should be in the top three of, the priorities of every nonprofit. So, and this stuff directly relates to that. So if you can't afford it, check out, there's various places you can go. If you feel your budget strapped, you can go to grants.gov, right? There's federal grants. You can go to Instrumental. That's a great database. The National Endowment of the Arts has a lot of great grants that you can use for helping your not just physical but digital now digital accessibility. If you really don't have any money, go to Catch a Fire. There's dev teams out there that'll do this on a pro bono basis for you, like find issues and fix them, like real humans fixing them, not AI fixing them. There isn't really an excuse for not caring about this. So I would just go out there. You do have to mobilize a little bit. You have to spend the time, but the resources are there if you look for them.
Yeah, there's always somewhere you can start. There are, even besides getting into the manual side of things, if this is your organization has just started thinking about, there's probably automated issues you can identify. Obviously, the tools that are most efficient are going to be probably paid to some degree, but our tool starts at an affordable price point. They do offer the free trials. There are free tools out there as well that you can use to start troubleshooting this. You can work on things like internal team training so that you know best practices around content development and launch. You can invest in training up your advocate, which is another question the next question we're going to jump to here is about the advocate. Making sure you have a consistent feedback mechanism so that if users are experiencing barriers, you are at least supporting them through that and documenting it to help further build the case for allocating budget to this next year, because that real user impact often moves the needle faster than anything else when you see that it is losing you donors or losing your audience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. Do you recommend having a specific person listed on a website to contact for anyone needing accessibility accommodations, like a person's name at company.com, for example, or would a generic email address accessibility@company.com work? I would, my take on this is as long as there is a point person within the organization who knows they are responsible for this and who is dedicated monitoring that email, and has a defined process, that would give an equivalent experience to using a direct contacts email. But what would you guys say?
Yeah, I would echo that, and I would say even at Elevation, I use accessibility at elevationweb.org. I am named on LinkedIn as the accessibility director and throughout the rest of the website. But when it comes to the actual channel for getting help to remove a barrier, I recommend keeping that neutral, and having strong structures in place internally for responsibility, as Gianna said. That is going to protect you in case your advocate changes over time.
Yeah.
Um,
That's exactly what I would recommend. It's really more important that you have that internal kind of training process and conversation. So there's a clear division of responsibility. Who is responsible for responding to accessibility related feedback? What is the time frame expectations for that? And if that person is out or switches, who can step up to monitor that role in their absence?
Yeah,
100%.
it depends on the organization size as well. The thing I'm always wary of is when you see accessibility at domain.com. Is anyone actually monitoring that
Mhm.
address? It's kind of a little too broad and non-committal. And personally, we've sent a lot of emails to accessibility email addresses. We've talked to a lot of folks that come to Accessible Web for projects, and that's one of the first things we review is their accessibility page. And the number of times I've heard, oh shoot, I didn't know that was an address. I got to figure out who's receiving that, who's mapped to that. It's kind of astounding. So if you use accessibility as your address, just make sure someone is documented as being responsible for it. And then in a smaller organization, really any organization, if you have someone that wants to take the lead on it, assuming you probably want them to be a longer term employee, someone established, having a specific name is a great way to do it. And then the other thing too, we always advocate is for a bigger organization that has like a support team accessibility is just good customer support. There's not really a reason to treat people with a disability that are hitting a barrier differently than your normal day-to-day customers that are hitting barriers or having trouble purchasing or tracking down a shipment or making a donation or finding, running into issues trying to buy tickets for a fundraising event. So the other way to do this is this requires training, but it can feel a little better for folks. It makes them more likely to report issues. Is when you just use your normal customer service contact info and you have your customer service system mapped up so that accessibility tickets get routed to folks that know how to do it. And ideally, broadly, you have a customer support, customer service team that everyone's had training, everyone knows how to deal with these. You should still probably have someone specialized to do the nuanced troubleshooting and making sure accommodations came through. Um, but yeah, broadly having your accessibility team be your customer service team in terms of that feedback coming in. That's also a great thing that just feels really natural for your customers.
Yeah, I think, as somebody who submits accessibility requests sometime, both personally and just generally, the thing that really matters is that it is acknowledged as a clear accessibility related request and that you get clear responses from the company in a timely manner. I think what would be a not as great experience is if you email in customer support, it's like, we'll get back to you within 5 business days. That's like, okay, I'm in the same queue as everybody else. This is not going to get acknowledged. The person who touches this doesn't know what to do with this, probably not going to know what to do with this. It's not confidence inducing. So it's really about giving that, proactive, responding in a way that is respectful to the degree to which this is a barrier to the user. It's different from somebody being like, oh, I have a question about my order, if they can't place an order or they can't access critical information about goods or services to complete an action that they need to complete. They're likely more frustrated already. Uh, all right. And guys, I am monitoring chat too. My chat permissions are a little bit off today, so I haven't been able to reply directly in chat. So my apologies that I've been a little less responsive over there than I would like to be. So we have an interesting question here about statistics regarding digital accessibility in the nonprofit sector. Does Evolution Web have research on the percentage of inaccessible NGO platforms? Alternatively, where would you recommend looking for this specific type of data or reporting?
Well, the data collection efforts that I've done, I don't mind sharing, right? Like I'm not, I can make that public. Anyone that wants to see our digital product database, all of the requests I've made for VPATs, all of the alternative technologies that we use at Elevation, like I 100% will share that. In terms of like, so statistics on like, were you asking for statistics on technologies only, or the percentage of nonprofits that have inaccessible websites, or
NGOs that are not accessible is where this question is aimed at.
NGO platforms.
And
So
yeah,
NGO
was
platform?
yeah, I
asked.
think the answer to this is kind of reach out to Erin after this. And
Yeah, because I mean, I'll share like I would say like donor CRM tools in particular. I found one out of like the 13 that I reached out to. If you want to know what that one is, it's Blackbot. They're the only ones with a VPAT. There are others that like they talk about accessibility as a priority, but it's not like really documented. And I actually called into their customer service and asked, like, do you have, and I spoke to people who clearly had no idea, and they would readily admit, we have no idea what you're talking about. Can you explain what a VPAT is?
Yeah.
So it's a really small percentage. In the plugin space, it's even smaller. We're like in terms of platforms that everybody uses every day, like the usual suspects that you would expect, like Google does a really great job, even though Google Maps is not perfectly accessible. Talk about an app that has billions of dollars behind it, and it's not perfectly accessible. There's known violations. We use Basecamp. Basecamp is really good. They're an accessible platform and they have documentation to back it up. I mean, what you'll find a lot is people making claims that they're accessible, but they don't have documentation to back it up. They have not invested in the actual audits. But the major, like Slack it does a pretty good job, all things considered. And so, yeah, for NGO platforms in particular, it's pretty abysmal. And then like I saw somebody in there asking about like statistics in general for how many nonprofits have accessible websites. I can't give you off the top of my head a percentage. I can tell you that Level Access puts out a really good report every year. The state of accessibility, the state of digital accessibility report. It's not like only in nonprofits, but I think they have a carve out where they looked at nonprofits for part of it. But like WebAIM Million report, they looking at the top million homepages, like 95% of homepages fail. We have about 50 errors on average per page, and it's getting worse. Like over the last couple of years, we've seen that number go up because home pages are getting longer and more complex. They have more panels, they have more elements, they have more interactive elements. People are trying to do fancier stuff now. And we still see the same 6 issues. There's like 6 issues that dominate, and they cause 96% of the errors that are found in that report. And all of those errors are super simple to fix. I mean, this doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be complex, like, right? There are nuanced issues. We need, firms like Accessible Web to find them. But if you look at like the percentage of errors that are caught by volume, not by percentage of WCAG success criteria. Like I said, 17 out of 50 you can check with an automated checker, but like automated DQ did an interesting study on this. They looked at 13,000 websites. It was like 300,000 individual pages, and they found that it was 57% of all errors by volume can be found by an automated checker. So we still have 43% that can't, but like that's interesting, right? Because the most common errors, what it's saying is that the most common errors are the simplest ones. They're
Yep.
the simplest ones to fix, and they repeat over and over. And so I'm sure if I could give you the exact statistic of the number of nonprofit websites that are not accessible today, it would be abysmally high. Because we know that it is, even for the top million websites, these are for-profits. They have marketing teams, they have dedicated dev teams, they have huge budgets, and they're not doing it, right?
Yeah. I know we're getting close to our time here. A couple more questions. One of them is related to the automated scanning here. So when auditing a nonprofit site, how does your team balance automated tools with manual testing, and where do you find automation falls short? I know that we've mentioned this before, and it's always a big question because, as you said, there's, depending on the nature of the site, the overall volume of issues that can be detected by automation can vary. If it's a simpler site with certain types of content, automation might catch a higher percentage of them. But at the end of the day, there's only a smaller percentage. I'm not even going to throw out an exact percentage number, but it's a small percentage of WCAG success criteria can actually be reliably checked by an automated scanner. Everything beyond that small percentage of WCAG success criteria, and sometimes it's a part of a specific success criteria, not even the whole success criteria in many cases,
Right.
needs to be checked by a human, because accessibility at the end of the day is for humans. And you need to verify that it is actually conformant in a way that is understandable and operable by people with a wide variety of system technologies. And there is human judgment involved in making those decisions and providing feedback and remediation tasks related to issues uncovered. And then, yeah, yeah,
Automated tools can't catch everything, but the benefit is that they are really fast. And
mhm.
so accessible web ramp, you can put a website in with, 1,000 pages, 5,000 pages. It gets a little longer. We load a page every 4 seconds or so is kind of how quickly our bot moves through. We want to not crash sites that we scan through, but we scan URLs and then we do the automated scan and then we aggregate it across the full website. And so you can sign up for Ramp. You can, might take 15 minutes for a smaller site, might take, the evening, and you check in the morning for a larger site. But you immediately have a prioritized list based on the criticality of the issues and how frequently they occur across the site of what to fix first. And you can start making immediate progress. There's really no excuse. If you have an agency that's ready to do this or an in-house developer, you have everything you need to start making changes and improvements to your website. And then that can help you to determine how good of a state your website's in, right? Like, was it easy to make those changes? Is your website maybe like, a decade old and has layer upon layer upon layer of, historic agencies or, if it's really a pain, you might want to think about the kind of repair versus rebuild type of discussion. You might find your developer that you have working on it, your agency that you have working on it is really good at it, or maybe they struggle to make the remediations. You might need to think about allocating different resources, a different team member to the project. So anyway, we always recommend starting with the automated because it's inexpensive. You don't need a human to test, and it can tell you a lot about your website, your team members, and you can start making improvements today. And then that automated improvement helps to improve your manual audit. When you get to the manual audit, you're going to need to pay a customer, or sorry, you're going to need to pay a person to, like a team member at Accessible Web or Elevation, depending on the situation, or your agency, whoever. You need to pay someone to run through all of those success criteria. And that's going to start to cost money because now you're paying for the testing and the remediation. So it kind of doubles your cost. Uh, and so by doing the automated stuff first, it gets the website into a better spot for the manual auditing so that hopefully the manual auditing is seeing more passing success criteria because that low-hanging fruit has been fixed. And then that's going to give you a better initial audit report. At Accessible Web, we always give an initial report. It's seldom amazing, but we want it to be as strong as possible because that's going to be your report. That's going to be your foundational report that you can show to your customers, show to your stakeholders, show to whoever's giving you grant money. That's kind of the immediate report you want to give them, and then you have to work on the remediation. So the higher your baseline is, the better off you're going to look. At least you don't look like you've been totally negligent in the accessibility of your site. And then you've got to start remediating the issues uncovered in the audit and get to a really good spot. So automation is less expensive. It gives you a good idea of how the rest of the project's going to go. And if you do it before your manual audit, it gets you set up for success so that you know what you're getting into for the manual audit. And hopefully that initial manual audit report is a lot better than had you not done anything in advance.
Yeah, and Ramya, just to answer directly, where do you find automation falls short? So it's not going to capture if your alt text is meaningful. It'll capture whether or not it's there. Won't capture if it makes any sense. It won't capture, like it might be able to detect, not reliably, the focus highlights are present, but it can't tell you if they proceed in a logical order. It won't tell you if you have any content issues, like if you have meaning conveyed by color alone, that's a big one. It can't catch that. If you have overly complex content structures, if you have keyboard traps, it has a hard time detecting that. If you have um, decorative images, right? Like this is a big one. You don't, there's this notion of like, well, if it's decorative, then you don't need alt text. So we can just mark it as decorative and skip over it. And I see people like marking all their images as decorative. Not every, maybe over half of them are decorative, but not all of them are decorative. That's kind of a tell that you're not really doing your due diligence there. So many other places where the automated tools will fall short, that throw up huge pernicious barriers for people. So even though, like the automated tools can catch more than half by volume, like you can't skip that audit. Do it once a year. If you can't afford that, then you know you can find a team to do something pro bono in the meantime, or you can look for a grant. But you have to find some way to get that audit done as frequently as you can, and the best practice is once per year.
All
All
right.
right, I want to hit
Right
on
at
this.
time.
Yeah, we're right at time. I want to hit on the AI one. Don't do one-shot AI builds and think your accessibility is going to be covered.
Sorry.
That's a quick answer.
It just
Um,
issues. It's what?
it's not there yet.
No.
It's about humans. Have humans test your site, please.
Yeah.
But thank you, Erin, so much. This has been awesome. And uh, thank you, everyone, for attending. And yeah, go to elevationweb.org to learn more about their nonprofit agency services and try out Accessible Web Ramp if you're looking for some accessibility tools and programming to help move your projects along. So thanks, everyone, for joining. Thanks, Erin.
Yeah.
Thanks, Deanna.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Erin. That was a fantastic conversation today. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you all for inviting me. Bye bye
Cool.
now.
All right, bye.